on up here. There, great. Ready? All right, well, thank you all for being here. I'm Greg Walden, and I represent the people of Oregon's 2nd Congressional District. I'm a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and chair its Subcommittee on Communications and Technology. As an Oregon taxpayer and as a federal taxpayer, I, for one, am very upset at how the federal and state governments have performed at producing these websites for the health care law. I and other top leaders of the House Energy and Commerce Committee have requested that the Government Accountability Office open a federal investigation into the failures of Cover Oregon. We have sent a letter to the GAO asking them to look into the issues that are at stake here when it comes to how the federal and state taxpayers' money has been spent and what we've gotten for it, what went wrong, and how we can avoid those sorts of mistakes in the future. Oregon has received $304 million in federal grants to design, build, and market Cover Oregon. To put that into perspective, we get about $100 million a year for secure rural schools. This is 3 times that amount. $300 million for Cover Oregon has gotten us little but a broken website and an advertising campaign. It's outrageous. It is unacceptable. Oregonians deserve accountability. They deserve answers. And it's time to pull the covers back on Cover Oregon and get them. As a nation, we were all upset and outraged, and rightfully so, at the broken promises of the federal health care law and at the failures to build out a federal health care website in a timely manner. It still is not fully built out. The part that connects your decision and your payment to the insurance company is yet to be completed. We were not told the truth about how it was progressing. Despite our questions, the investigations at the federal level will continue. It is time to get the truth. It is time to get transparency, and it's time for accountability. The result so far is unacceptable, and it's also unacceptable to Dennis, and it's unacceptable to the people of Oregon. That's why we're requesting the GAO to do an independent, outside investigation. Now, I'm joined by the top leaders of the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Chairman, Brett Upton, the Chairman of the Oversight and Investigations Committee, Tim Murphy, the Chairman of the Health Subcommittee, my friend Joe Pitts, and of course myself as Chairman of Communications and Technology. We want the GAO to look at the structure of the organization, but also the federal money that it received and the federal oversight of the website construction that was supposed to occur. As you know, the federal government was supposed to be watching how the federal taxpayers' money was spent and whether goals were being achieved. The GAO is known for its high-quality, independent, and factual investigations. They'll be able to give us an honest and unbiased view of what transpired, where the money was spent, and what the taxpayers can get back. I've worked with the GAO before on numbers of investigations about waste, fraud, and abuse all across the government over the years. You can trust them to do good, independent work. These are serious questions, major implications not only for Oregon but also for taxpayers nationwide. We owe the 150,000 Oregonians who liked but lost their health insurance because of the health care law, and who now don't even have a website they can go to sign up. We owe them answers. Like so many Oregonians, I'm furious to only now be discovering that state administrators knew as far back as 2011 that Cover Oregon was going off the tracks. Red flags were being raised left and right, but they kept plowing on ahead and kept asking the feds for more money for the process. Representative Dennis Richardson was one of the first people to raise the red flag and begin to ask questions about the status of Cover Oregon. That was 3 years ago, 2011. He has never let up on that effort to get answers and to stop problems when it comes to Cover Oregon. These are federal tax dollars that were spent, and the federal government has a role in overseeing how they were spent and whether the goals were met, and if not, why. Federal grants shouldn't be sent into a void to be spent without direction, ambition, or accountability. Every single grant the state of Oregon received from Health and Human Services had a set purpose and was to be used to help the Cover Oregon marketplace meet specific goals and criteria. Along with state, federal agencies were responsible for making sure those dollars were used appropriately and effectively. For example, the Center for Consumer Information and Insurance Oversight, a part of HHS, is responsible for implementing the state-run health exchanges and administering these grants. Given what we've seen from the state exchange, it's clear that that oversight was hardly effective. With that, I'll turn it over to Representative Richardson for his comments about the experience he's had and what he's seen. Dennis?
Yours. During the 2011 session, while serving as the co-chair of Ways and Means, the co-chairs were approached by a request from the Oregon Health Authority to accept $48 million to help be one of the leaders and one of the early preparers by a state of an exchange. I said that at first that we could not accept that because the experience that the state of Oregon has had in running IT projects has been one failure after another, and that there was no reason to expect that accepting this kind of money from the federal government would not lead to another drastic failure and a waste of taxpayers' dollars. After several weeks, I was finally convinced that the Oregon Health Authority would do differently with this kind of program, that they would hire a quality assurance team, that there would be not only quality assurance but quality control, that there would be oversight, that there would be triggers, and that if at any time it appeared that this was not going to be a successful program, that we would shut it down. With those guarantees, with those commitments, we approved the acceptance of $48 million to be one of the early adopters of the Oregon Health Exchange and create an exchange. $11 million more was added to that, but what we found was in the months following the acceptance of these early grants, there was no hiring even of the quality assurance team. When I found this out, I put great pressure on the health authority to follow up and do what they committed to do. They finally hired Maximus, a quality assurance team, to come in and be an outside expert to watch what was taking place. After just a short time with the evaluation of Maximus, they said, this project is in terrible shape. They don't have foundational documents, they don't have proper expertise, they don't have the leadership, they don't have the processes in plan to make it successful. Every month, Maximus came back with additional reports about the incompetency and the inadequacy of the Oregon Health Exchange, which became renamed Cover Oregon. In September of 2012, the situation was so bad that I sent an email with a copy of the Maximus report to all of the leaders of the exchange and to the Oregon Health Authority, indicating that they were on a course to fail, that this was a train wreck that we were heading toward, and without significant change and proper oversight, that this was going to be a failure. I realize this is in September of 2012, more than 13 months before the site was supposed to go live. I got no response, so I sent another email to the governor directly, and by the way, he was copied on that first email, that first letter, laying it all out with the Maximus report attached. So I then sent one directly to the governor. Again, no response. So I called the governor, and he returned the call, and over the phone I explained to him that this project was doomed to fail unless he took responsibility and assured that there was proper oversight and that changes were made. He assured me that it would take place, that would happen. That was September of 2012. In December of 2012, then State Representative Patrick Sheehan sent another notice to the leaders and to the governor indicating that there was problems with the plan, that it was not going to lead to a successful launch date, and that additional plea was ignored. So now we go forward to October of 2013, when the launch was supposed to take place on October 1st, and we have, and this is almost unbelievable, but everyone that was involved with the project knew it wasn't going to work. And yet they flipped the switch expecting lights to go on, and there was no wiring in the walls. And so, no surprise, the launch did not work. And so now we are 4 months later, and it still we have not enrolled a single individual through Cover Oregon. Recently, the governor was asked when did he find out that there were problems with Cover Oregon? He said he found out in October of last year. Weeks after the launch date, he said that was the first he knew that there were problems. Well, that's obviously not true because of the emails and the conversation that I had with him. So now the response from the governor's office is, we'll spend $228,000 more of taxpayer money and hire another independent group to come forward and do an audit to figure out what happened with Cover Oregon. Well, if you read closely what the contract says, it says that they do not need to disclose the findings in this most recently contracted audit. That makes no sense. If you have Cover Oregon with Maximus's quality assurance reports every month indicating what the problems were, you do not need to hire someone else to come in at $250,000 and then have in the contract that they do not need to disclose what their findings are. We need transparency in behalf of the taxpayers for the state of Oregon. We need to know what happened, how the money was spent, whether or not there was fraud, waste, abuse, or even criminal activity that took place, so that we can fix the problem and ensure that this does not happen again. We're not going to have that when the governor's hiring his own team to come in and do an audit, and they don't have to reveal the results of that audit. And so with that, we've asked Oregonians to weigh in and see how they felt about petitioning for a federal GAO audit. And as a result, we have 5,000 Oregonians who have joined in this request for Congressman Walden's office to ask for a GAO audit to come in so that we will find out the truth as to what has taken place, so that we can learn the mistakes that have been made, and that we can assure that this does not continue to happen in the future. Thank you.
All right, we'd be happy to take your questions.
The GAO request, does that require them to do an investigation, or do they have to accept it before they actually do it?
They end up accepting it. It's up to them, but we've worked very closely with them on the crafting of the questions and the scope of the investigation. I believe I could say with confidence they're comfortable with what we've requested and that they will proceed.
How soon would you like to hear back from them realistically?
In terms of the output of their investigation, these things take a while. They are very thorough, they're very independent. So they will go, they know what we're trying to find out here. They will go forth and do their job, and when they feel like they're at a point of completion, they'll come and talk to us about it. So it'll be, I would assume it would take several months.
What kind of influence would that have on a state-organized healthcare plan?
The issue here, I think, for the state is that it is federal money, still taxpayer money, but federal money coming in. There were federal obligations here, federal benchmarks, federal requirements. We need to know were those met. Was there proper oversight done by the federal agencies as they doled out the money to the state? Further, did the state do its job? Now, they aren't going to be doing a criminal investigation. They don't do that kind of work. There are other elements within the government that might be doing that. I don't know. But clearly there are allegations that are very serious being made around Cover Oregon, and this requires pulling the covers off. This requires going after it, finding out the truth, and finding out why we're only now learning of these problems, and frankly only now learning because of the investigative work of the journalists of this state.
Just one more question. What kind of influence would that report have? What could that possibly do to Cover Oregon?
Well, it can. I used to serve on the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, so I'm pretty familiar with the work that they provide. If they find something they believe potentially rises to the level of a criminal abuse, they will refer that to the Justice Department, perhaps, or to the state. They'll run this out as far as their authorities allow. And in the past, there have been instances where the GAO has uncovered examples of potential fraud, and it gets referred to appropriate officials. There are a couple of things here. One is to figure out where did the system break down and why, and so you don't replicate that in future projects. I mean, so there's a public policy piece to this as well as an accountability and transparency piece about the actual money. I mean, we've used them for a lot of independent look. They're the professionals. They really are. They are independent. They are professional. They'll get us the answers. And, we'll go from there. Frequently that leads to other oversight hearings or other activities, but we'll need to get that report.
Congressman, can you talk about the timeline of an audit, when Oregonians can expect it to begin and potentially how long it will
I really
last?
don't know the answer to that because it will be up to the Government Accountability Office to get it into their queue. They obviously know this is important to one of the most powerful committees in the House that has jurisdiction over this agency, that HHS in this case, and that, I think when Chairman Upton and myself and two other subcommittee chairs are all asking for this, they will move expeditiously. But again, they will do their work, and they will do it independently. So we don't, We don't tell them what to do and how to do it and how to do their job. We tell them what we want to find out. They go about their work independently, so we'll wait.
Can I ask you each how important this is as a political campaign issue, nationally for the House and in Oregon for the governorship?
Well,
Each of you, please.
yeah, sure. This is an issue about potential waste, fraud, and abuse in government spending. This is an issue that first began to develop in 2011. This is an issue that has transcended several years and various people involved. That's our purpose and goal here, is getting answers for Oregonians who are wondering what the heck happened. Why are all these billboards and everything else up telling you to go to a website that does not function? That's what we're about.
I would be here having the same feelings and taking the same action if I was not running for governor. The information that I provided originally as the co-chair of Ways and Means was to avoid the very thing that's taken place. I mean, the things that I was warning of are exactly the things that have happened. And we cannot continue to have one project after another that is, we spend millions and millions of dollars on, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, only to have them come in above budget, be total failure, or be or not be able to accomplish what they were intended to do. We want to ensure that this kind of thing does not happen again. The fact that I'm running for governor is not an issue in the work that I did as co-chair of Ways and Means 3 years ago.
The Oregon Health Authority was given a lot of spending power when it came to creating Cover Oregon. Do you think that it was reckless or irresponsible of Kitzhaber or the legislature to give the Oregon Health Authority that kind of spending power without oversight or much oversight?
That is the number one question. How did this occur? There was oversight. We hired a quality assurance team. The team did its job. They were warned every month to to the greatest extent possible as to whether or not this project was moving forward, and if not, where the problems were. They ignored that. And so we have a situation where the governor has either a short memory, because he said he didn't know about it, or he did know about it and he's not telling us the truth, or if he did know about it, there's incompetency for failing to have the oversight. One way or another, we've got a project that we knew was in trouble. It continued in trouble. The problems were identified, diagnosed, and ignored, and now we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars and we have nothing to show for it.
See, we faced the same thing in Wishing with the healthcare.gov website. The Government Accountability Office did their investigations. They warned Congress and the administration back in the summer that this website wasn't ready. They continue to provide us with great information. And yet the Secretary of Health and Human Services would come before our committee and tell the American people everything's good to go, stop worrying. And then we find out they hadn't even done their end-to-end test. There's still great questions about security. We know the back end of the site they now have had to admit to on healthcare.gov is not built out so that your payment connects to your decision to the insurer. I mean, this is a disaster. And people's lives are affected every day because they're being sent to websites that have no sign-ups. In Oregon and for a long time at the federal site, and people lost in the gap. People are getting cancellation notices thinking they signed up, but their payment never got processed. That could be upwards of 20% of those who have signed up, I'm reading.
So on the coattails of that, this document says that it doesn't appear federal oversight was adequately performed. How much responsibility do you hold with the feds for not having enough oversight?
I think it's both. And that's why we're asking the GAO to look into that, too. To say, okay, federal agencies, you're the ones that signed off on the next tranches of money. Did you do your job? How did this fall through your checks and balances? Now, we know from the federal side, federal agencies haven't done a good job holding themselves accountable for the creation of healthcare.gov. They've missed all kinds of things along the way.
I'll tell you what we really have is a failure of stewardship. As representatives of the people, we have a stewardship over the people's money, and yet it's treated as if it's just numbers on a page. When I talked with the governor about this problem, he said, you need to trust the team. I said, Governor, if it was your money, or if you were the head of a group of investors that were putting $48 million into a project, and you hired an independent QA team to oversee the investment, and your QA team said that this is a train wreck waiting to happen, you wouldn't tell them, just trust the team. That's why you have the QA. And I said to him, if you don't take action on this, It'll be on your shoulders, Governor, because you're the one that can make this happen. And that's all, I mean, that's all a matter of fact. I included that in the email that I sent to him.
You know, it's sort of like when television stations had to convert to all digital, there was a cutoff in a timeline. I'm assuming your engineers figured out that whoever was doing the work was meeting the timelines, and when they flipped the switch, you'd go up on digital. This is the same thing. You had a timeline to go convert, create a system that would work, because the switch was being cut off, in this case, on 150,000 Oregonians who lost their health insurance. And then, how many people did they have to hire to manually process the paper? Several hundred?
400
At what
additional
cost?
people. And look at the amount
Millions.
of pencils that are being used now to fill out those reports. Maybe that's economic development, I'm not sure. We have such a challenge because it didn't have to happen. You had the QA telling the leaders that this is a train wreck and you're speeding down the track, and yet the leaders and the governor are in the club car toasting each other on the great success that's coming. This is his legacy. This is healthcare. This is Oregon leading the way. And it's an abject disaster that did not have to happen.
Do you think Oregon should just give up and cover Oregon at this point rather than spend more money on it?
I proposed an amendment to a bill for this legislative session, specifically asking for that to be evaluated. There's a legislative committee that's considering the options that are available, but certainly it wouldn't make sense to continue spending good money after bad when there are other options available to sign up people for health care.
If an audit does go forward, depending on what the findings reveal, what sort of response can Oregonians expect
First, we have to-
representatives to take?
Well, generally, whether it's an Inspector General's report or a GAO report, they will make some recommendations, or at least identify where they see that the failings were. And I would hope that whoever's in charge at that point, when that report comes out, would take those to heart and make the appropriate changes so that there's transparency, so there's accountability. Like, is it any wonder Americans have little confidence in their governments at this point? When these sorts of things go on, and the amount of money that seems to be squandered, now eventually get a website working. I mean, that's happening nationally, although there's still questions about its security and if it's fully built out. You still have all the back end after that of problems that people are encountering. So, you know, we'll take the report once we get it and evaluate it from there.
There's also a big question as to whether or not Cover Oregon is even sustainable. Because from the beginning, we were told that if this project is not self-sufficient, we will shut it down. That was the promise that were made to us. They were expecting 150 to 200,000 individual health policy holders to sign up, each paying about $9 a month on their premium to help fund the oversight and Cover Oregon system. They now have 34,000 actual individual policy holders signed up, and the estimate by the current director for Cover Oregon is that they would need 145,000 policy holders and a 20% reduction in their budget in order to break even. And that's not going to happen.
In the letter, you asked the Accountability Office to look into whether that grant money can be reclaimed. Can you explain your understanding of what that means or what you want to see come from that?
My understanding is there may be upwards of $100 million that hasn't been spent, maybe a higher number than that. You know, all this is a question in and of itself. And if it hasn't, does it have to be? And can it be reclaimed, and what are the consequences if we go down that path? You just, you know, having been a small business owner myself for 22 years, you hate to see good money thrown after bad money thrown after good money. I mean, it just, if you don't have, if it's being thrown into a pot and flushed out, then, you know, let's stop the damage and get a site that works. But this just, there's a lot of smoke here.